Welcome back to Dragon Ball Dissection December. Don't forget, you have a chance at a holiday gift. Any patron during the month of December can win a copy of Akira Toriyama's Manga Theater, a massive collection of Toriyama's one-shot manga creations. See the details in last week's video or head on over to the post in the description at patreon.com/MrFusion. Good luck! I wish I could sound as excited about what we're talking about today. Gohan's fight with Majin Boo. I've admitted before that there are stories on the periphery of Dragon Ball that just don't leave much of an impression on me. That was the case for October's Ano Yoichi Budokai arc. If you had told me in September I would make a nearly half-hour-long video on the subject, I would never have believed you, because at that point I had no memory of what happened in it beyond the absolute basics. That is not the case for the original Dragon Ball series. I know this story inside and out. I definitely reread every chapter before I start writing, but I barely need to. I know this. I know all of it. Well, here's my dirty little secret. This is the one section of Dragon Ball that just won't stay in my brain. It slides out of my ear every time. What happens in Dragon Ball between Gotenks and the final battle? I don't know, a bunch of terrible boring crap I can't remember. That sounds foreboding, but that also means there's an opportunity for me to discover a new appreciation for it I never had before. Then again, that's what I was hoping for going into the aforementioned Ano Yoichi Budokai arc, only to realize it was far worse than I had ever remembered. Let me just give you my personal guarantee here. I won't pull any punches, but I also won't skim over the positives when I come to them. I stand by what I said all the way back in 2012. There is no part of the original Dragon Ball that I truly, completely hate. And even here, there are good kernels, enjoyable moments. There is nothing without at least some redeemable elements. So with that said, let's start cutting into this sucker. We don't call this a dissection for nothing. So a quick synopsis. Gohan arrives and kicks Majin Boo's butt for a while. Boo pretends to blow himself up, and when he returns an hour later, he goads Goten and Trunks to fuse into Super Gotenks again. They fall for the bait, and Boo absorbs both Gotenks and Piccolo, allowing him to outclass Gohan. When all seems lost, it's up to Ten Shinhan to save the day? As I said last time, my problem with Gohan here is that he doesn't really feel like Gohan anymore. He doesn't feel like anybody. It feels like Toriyama's last-ditch effort to make Gohan work as the central protagonist, but this time he's just throwing him full-on into the Goku role. And that's banking against the far more likely scenario that he exists as nothing more than a fake-out. But even making him Goku doesn't work because he doesn't have Goku's charm, that balance of heroics and naivete. When we've had Gohan take up the hero mantle in the past, there's at least been that element of self-doubt, the fear that he doesn't have what it takes, which makes him interesting. That's what we see in the Cell arc, and it's what we see when he confronts Boo the first time. For sure, that's a trait that he needs to overcome. It's always been an obstacle undermining the idea that he has truly earned this role. In his fight against Cell, Goku needs to step in and give him support. In his first fight with Boo, he's unable to rise to the occasion. This fight needs to contrast those to show Gohan truly, finally stepping into this role. But when you take away his performance anxiety, what is he left with that's engaging? Is it engaging that he has a smug smirk on his face? Is it engaging that he insults Boo's intelligence that one time? What does he have going for him that makes him stand out from generic hero guy? And how satisfying can it ultimately be to see Gohan overcome his self-doubt, only to fail worse than he's ever failed before? What's the point? As someone who has eagerly followed Gohan's journey from the beginning, I can find a degree of satisfaction in him falling into a leader role. I like how he has the answers, how Goten, Piccolo, and Trunks trust him, how he figures out that Dende has survived, that Piccolo was converting Room of Spirit and Time wrong. But just as Gohan tends to share hairstyles with Yamcha, I feel he also shares this underwhelming sensation I get from both of them when they're thrust into leader roles. Remember that? After Yamcha's storyline resolved itself, Toriyama began writing him as the guy with the exposition, the guy who has all the answers, the guy who makes the plans and shuttles everyone around. And that's nice. As I said all those years ago, he's Fred from Scooby-Doo. He's functional, he's necessary, he's just not all that interesting anymore. He's certainly not nearly as interesting as the hyper-competent schemer, constantly foiled because he can't form a sentence around women, or the shy nerd who gets his kicks by dressing up as a flamboyant superhero. And yes, I just compared the most powerful version of Gohan to Yamcha. I don't care, I love both of them. But that's why this section drags so hard for me. Gotenks has the advantage of kicking things off. The fireworks are still fresh, the shock and novelty are still carrying through. And on top of that, Gotenks is hilarious, and his attacks are unique. It's easier to overlook his failure because of those reasons. Gohan suffers from all the problems of Gotenks without any of the advantages. As the middle serve in Boo Tennis, Gohan benefits neither from starting us off nor defeating the enemy. And that makes him something of a throwaway. Since I've complained for a while now, let me mix it up with some praise. Structurally, I'm glad this section of the fight allows for a breather. The pace and action can't be up, up, up forever. It starts to blend together. Stories need peaks and valleys. Having Boo go out with a bang so that he can run and hide creates that needed diversity. The characters get a chance to talk. The tension is not completely relieved because Gohan makes it clear that Boo is not dead. What is he planning? It creates an opportunity to bring Mr. Satan, Dende, and the puppy back into the story. Since Mr. Satan has proven himself the most interesting part of this story arc, I appreciate that. It allows his character growth to continue. Like Videl before him, he is put in a position where he must acclimate to the wild and unbelievable elements of the world that he, either never believed in or at least convinced others was just a trick. He begins to trust these people and they begin to tolerate him. Trunks is almost willing to simply let him suffer, but Piccolo has already come to admire the man for his unexpected taming of Majin Buu. There's something sweet about that. And naturally, he provides a conduit for comedy. Piccolo drops him when he realizes Dende is alive. Mr. Satan can't believe that Dende is God or what Majin Buu's ki means. His truly sacrificial moment of accepting that Buu must be stopped at all costs is comedically undercut by him actually believing that his gun will do the job. If that wasn't funny enough, the wonderfully coincidental timing that he fires his gun at the same moment Tenshinhan appears with his Kikoho makes the characters think he actually stopped Boo's blast. Granted, I'd be remiss if I didn't quibble over this a little. Mr. Satan should definitely know well enough by now that guns have no effect on Majin Buu. It's another joke that's certainly very funny, but doesn't proceed organically from character. This one might be good enough to overlook though, which is a balancing act stories often need to consider. Of course, the best part of this break in the fight is because it exists in order to further a strategy. As I said, Gohan already knows Buu isn't dead, so what is his plan? What's he going to do? Now that he's back, what is different? It's conceivable you'd be on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next, since unlike Cell, Buu doesn't immediately give the entire game away. Or you might have picked up on Boo's reaction to Gotenks' proclamation of needing an hour to rest, and the fact that the length of Boo's absence also happens to be an hour. So you might realize this is some kind of trap, but aren't quite sure yet what it's going to be. For all of its faults, this at least manages to hold interest, keep me engaged. Boo's plan, as it turns out, is to absorb Gotenks at his most powerful in order to beat Gohan in a fight. Understanding the power is time-sensitive, he waits until the best possible moment. Like Cell, he's smart enough to manipulate Gotenks' arrogance in order to get what he wants. Boo has pulled off bits of himself in the past for uniquely dangerous attacks. Now we see that it can also be used to literally pull other characters into him, altering him even more. Physically, his facial features become more defined and angular with a longer forelock, and even adding a nose. Sartorially, he gains Gotenks' fusion vest, although, as I've said, it's not all that different from the vest the fat Majin Buu wears. Majin Buu continues to handle transforming better than his villain predecessors. Similar to Cell, he can absorb others to become stronger, but since there is no linear path for this, there's no predetermined outcome, no perfect form. What is Buu ultimately going to become? We don't know because that's entirely dependent on who he gets his hands on. It also means that every character is in danger, not just of a beatdown, but of having their individuality stolen and becoming a detriment instead of an asset. Because Buu can't transform at will like Frieza does, he has to resort to some degree of strategy and subterfuge. He's not stupidly holding back his best moves, he has to take advantage of the heroes letting down their guard. The obvious problem with this is the, well, tennis match. Boo is stronger than Gotenks, who powers up to Super Saiyan 3 to become stronger than Boo. He loses Super Saiyan 3 and Fusion, making Boo stronger than Goten and Trunks. Gohan shows up and is stronger than Boo. Boo absorbs Gotenks and Piccolo and becomes stronger than Gohan. It's the same old back and forth that we've been getting since 1990 that renders characters no more useful than their latest power-up. Where the plan struggles is in having to cobble together an explanation as to why Boo didn't just absorb Gohan, who's even more powerful than Super Gotenks. Boo reasons that there's no point in having power without a strong person to fight. I mean, that's fine, I guess. Boo has consistently wanted to be entertained, and that has sometimes expressed itself through combat. It's also pretty much the same motivation that Cell had, with the same short-sighted solution. He still wants to beat the strongest guy, which is Gohan, and after that, more snacks? I'm getting tired of the villains not having any more of a motivation than I want to fight the strong guy. And it's a strength that's only going to last for 5 minutes. Granted, this is Dragon Ball where 5 minutes can go on for weeks, but still. Well, go ahead and forget that, because at one point Boo asserts to Gohan he has 10 minutes left. Can he hold on to Super Saiyan 3 powers more easily than Gotenks? Or is he just talking about the fusion and 20 minutes have already passed? But Goten and Trunks claimed that Super Saiyan 3 shortened their fusion too. I'm beginning to think Toriyama is just going to throw out a different set of numbers every time this technique is mentioned. This is basically the point where Boo becomes boring too. Adding Piccolo to his makeup leaves him far more mature and less playful. However, Boo's playfulness is what set him apart from prior villains. Now he's the same arrogant, cackling, generically motivated blowhard from the last arc. So we have boring Gohan and boring Boo. No wonder I can never remember this section of the story. Now that Boo is transformed, the fight flips completely. After all that waiting for Gohan to power up and save the day, it only takes 7 pages of him getting beaten up before the Kaioshin realize it's time to move on to someone more reliable. And so, in Dragon Ball's 500th numbered installment, Goku comes back to life, and Vegeta is summoned by Enma to join the battle. And I guess that's fitting, as Dragon Ball has largely been the Goku and Vegeta show ever since. I can certainly accept Enma keeping Vegeta around, given the circumstances. The timing is a bit coincidental. The Earth has continuously been in dire circumstances ever since Vegeta died, so why only now? I guess even Enma's disappointed in Gohan. It's smart of the story to once again make use of Uranai Baba's one-day free pass, re-establishing it in a lighthearted context at the beginning of the arc, so that it ultimately pays off under more serious circumstances. Over on Goku's side, he comes back to life because the Elder Kaioshin offers his life to him. We see here that Kibito hasn't entirely gotten over his superiority complex, as he immediately balks at a god giving up his life for a human? I think it's nice to see a new godly power, although putting these two events next to each other shows just how easy it is for people in this series to come back to life. Even if the Dragon Balls aren't involved, there are still 2 completely separate methods to return Goku and Vegeta to Earth. Thankfully, Toriyama keeps it from being too infuriating by closing it out with a wonderful joke. The old god slumps over, dead. Goku's halo disappears and he solemnly promises to make this life count. Then the Elder Kaioshin sits back up, a halo now over his head, insisting he'd better. After all, what difference does death really make to a god? It's why I continue to not understand why Kaio decides to stay dead at the end of the Cell arc. What's the point? Returning to the fight the story has already given up on, Gohan takes his beating like the outmoded hero that he is. Thankfully, Dende is there to heal him. He even goes to the extra effort to heal Gohan's clothes. I mean, yeah, Namekians can do that, but is that really the priority right now? They even get trashed again by the next page, so there is literally no point. Anyway, this annoys Boo. I mean to say, the healing annoys Boo, not that the clothes get torn again. Anyway, this annoys Boo, who attempts to take Dende out, which leads to that Mr. Satan joke I mentioned earlier. Chapter 501 was the first chapter to hit the streets in 1995, adding a splash of color for the first time in a few months. Its title page shows Mr. Satan confronting Boo and Gohan while riding a tank. Placed alongside the chapter title, a savior appears? The implication is that said savior is Mr. Satan. He certainly seems to think so. But it's not his bullet that deflects the blast, it's Tenshinhan and his Kikoho. Yes, after making a few brief appearances throughout the arc, Tenshinhan shows up to save the day. As with so many things, my views on this are mixed. As far as a new savior showing up, I like this a lot better than what we've typically been getting for the past few years. Tenshinhan is clearly not being touted as the new, biggest, bestest thing ever. He doesn't become the next serve of Boo Tennis, the strongest guy for 30 seconds until the next strongest guy. There's no big build-up, no huge power-up, he's just a strong warrior who shows up to do what he can. It's a feeling of camaraderie, of desperation, not of needless hype. In his brief context, he actually does accomplish something. Barely. I like that. Dragon Ball needs more Tenshinhan entrances and fewer Gohan and Gotenks entrances. On the other hand, I struggle to see the point of including this. I guess it's something for the fans, but it does very little to combat the frustrating idea that only the strongest guy has any purpose being here. There's no reason why Gohan couldn't have saved Mr. Satan and Dende. It's little more than a glorified cameo, a brief timeout that does little to justify itself. Tenshinhan shows up, fires the Kikoho once, and before he does anything else, Boo's severed legs knock him out. I mean, that's pretty lame. When Goku returns, he cuts Boo in half. The legs land next to Tenshinhan, who seems to shrug and go, this is fine. And he just stays in the same spot until the legs jump up and sucker kick him. Even if I didn't know that Boo could do stuff like that, I still wouldn't want to stand there with them. It comes across like it's trying to recreate his big moment from the Cell arc, but in that case, his interruption impacts the story for quite a long time afterwards. Here, you could easily write this out of the story and not know you missed anything. It's a nice effort, but it doesn't quite hit that same sweet spot. That's it for this week of Dragon Ball Dissection December. Next time we look at those crazy Patara earrings. I have quite a lot to say about those and the character they create. Boo Tennis continues, and if you're a $10 or higher patron, you can see it right now. On top of that, every patron has an opportunity to win a copy of Akira Toriyama's Manga Theater. Check out the link in the description or look back to last week's video to find out more. Thanks for continuing to spend the month with me. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time!